Power and Influence, Communicating for Understanding by Denise Collins. This presentation is a study of power and influence through power messages, power strategies, communication, and leader-member exchange theory. Power messages. How do leaders attain power? Do they innately have it, or do their followers give it to them? The power of a leader may be easily denoted by the arrangement of furniture, the type of furniture, and the room arrangement. For example, a judge or president who sits behind a large desk or a loftier place may be easily seen as having power. In our work environments, we may be called to the supervisor's office. While she sits behind her desk, we are left standing. This signifies her power and influence. Other factors can also affect a leader or follower's power. These can include seating arrangements at meetings. Do you belong to a clique or coalition at work? Oftentimes, staff will sit amongst groups of people where they are thought as having more power. Symbolic items like diplomas, awards, and titles can also increase one's perception of power and influence. Interestingly, there have been experiments done where the same person was introduced around a college campus to different groups of students as having a variety of titles, from student lecturer, senior lecturer, professor, respectively. After the presentation and after the visitor left the room, students were asked to gauge his height. The guest's height was estimated as being much taller when introduced as a professor than as a student. Appearances are another factor to consider. Specialized clothing and uniforms have a history of helping us to determine one's status. A pretty common circumstance may be willing to assist or buy a cup of coffee for someone in military uniform over someone else you see on the street. A person with tattoos may be regarded as one not to mess with, or a person the human resources manager may be less interested in hiring. Finally, situational factors can affect the potential for power and influence. Generally, leaders are given more leeway to exert power during turmoil or crisis than during everyday business. For example, during a crisis, leaders who are apt to normally use reverent power with their group may draw on legitimate and coercive power during the crisis. More will be discussed with this later in the presentation. Power strategies. In 1959, two psychologists, John French and Burton Raven, brought to light the 5 types of power that are possessed by one or more members of a group. 2 new types were introduced later. When work is organized by team instead of functions, there can be considerable more personal ownership by individuals. As a result, leadership and power can be extended to the lowest organizational levels. The types of power are position power. That is when a person in higher position has control over those in lower positions. If the person in position of power justifiably earned it, the group will respond favorably to the leader. If the position was not legitimately earned, it can be detrimental to company progress. Coercive power is recognized when a person leads by threats or force. The power of punishing others can be used at all levels. This is visible when others refuse to cooperate because their views were not taken into account. We are all familiar with reward power. That's the opposite of coercive power, when one is given the power to allocate, promote, and award. At other levels, this power can be shown with social payoffs and increased goodwill. Expert power is noted by the group's perception that one has expertise in a certain area. For example, if the group member has a PhD in economics or statistics, they may be called upon as the expert source at meetings for those areas. Complications can arise when a knowledgeable team member's expertise is not recognized, or when the wrong individuals are noted as qualified experts. In addition, to keep their status among team members, experts must keep up with their knowledge. For example, a master of IT must keep up with the latest technology. Reverent power is held by people with true positive leadership qualities. including charisma and integrity. Even if a person is not in a position of leadership, having these qualities will help them get the cooperation needed to do the job. Reference is the most valuable type of power. Information power is the power of some team members to influence by the information they possess. When information is fresh and relevant, these individuals can help guide the group. They may be connected to reliable sources that can supply them with important information that can be shared with the team. Once the information is released, power is released. So this should not be considered a long-term strategy. Finally, connection power. That is having connections with influential or important people. This can also be called networking power. If I have a connection to a famous movie star or someone in politics that you want to meet, that gives me power. Communication techniques. The effectiveness of any power strategy depends not on the agent's behavior itself, but rather on the target's perception of that behavior. In other words, power is evident or enforced only when it is recognized by another individual as such. Regardless of what types of power one wishes to employ, communication may be the most important indicator in how individual power is perceived. A person's perception of their supervisor's or employee's leadership can be studied through a number of behavioral alteration techniques, BATs. BATs are the messaging or statements that have power and influencing effects on leaders and subordinates. Both the communication from the subordinate to the leader and the leader to the subordinate is dynamic. Researchers who study employee satisfaction have looked closely at a number of variables that can influence these outcomes for organizations. However, many researchers agree that more research should take place on how communication affects power and influence. Subordinates tend to perceive that they use expert power more than any of the other powers. This makes sense since expert power is not always exerted by designated leaders. Expert power can be utilized by anyone with the greatest understanding or knowledge. Researchers argue that in spite of this, effective leaders should focus mostly on relationship skills or reverent and connective powers. Coercive power is the least utilized power by subordinates, and there is a negligible need to develop this power. On the other hand, but not surprisingly, supervisors communicate almost equally both expert power and reverent power with the group. The suggestion from researchers is that well-developed people skills or reverent power go far greater than expertise with direct reports. Again, coercive power is tended to be used the least. This is good, as some would argue that this power should never be used. Some researchers liken these results to the perception that there is a level of reciprocity in their organizations. If I like you, then you'll like me and do for me. Still, many group members believe that their leaders think they use reverent power more than they actually do. Types of leadership. As situations change, so should our leadership styles. In work groups with a designated leader, the approach will usually depend on the leader-member relations, the structure of the task, and the leader's power. It is not unusual, though, if there is no designated leader, to have a leader emerge during this point. The approaches to leadership are the trait approach, the style approach, and the contingency approach. Each has an effect on leadership and how a leader contains power. The trait approach is based on the understanding that all leaders possess common traits so that they can lead with effectiveness. While traits such as physical attractiveness, sociability, desire for leadership, originality, and intelligence were once considered to make effective leaders, research has proved this theory wrong. In the 1940s, the style approach was studied. The three managerial styles brought to light through this approach included the authoritarian, the democratic, and the laissez-faire. Each has a unique style. Authoritarian leaders use their power at their disposal to control members. The democratic style invites members to participate and help make decisions. The laissez-faire style gives up position power and can eventually equalize group members. In contrast, researchers believe that the best qualities for leadership show high concern for product and people. Finally, the contingency approach states that the best leadership style is flexible and works in tandem with the situation at hand. Psychologist Fred Fiedler determined that there are times when a leader should focus on specifically a task or relationship issues. Fiedler stated that leaders should understand leader-member relations or loyalty, task structure or complexity of job, and the leader's power or job title and ability to influence or reward. Leader-member exchange theory, or LMX. Leader-member exchange theory is also an important part of leadership's influence on teams. LMX describes how leaders and groups maintain their position through tactic exchange agreements with their members, or a variety of unique relationships with each member of the team. For example, the company vice president probably would not make a member of their clerical staff their go-to person for high-level concerns. Most times in business, it is recognized that leaders share a special relationship with their inner circle of lieutenants, assistants, and advisors. These are the people with the most responsibility, influence to make decisions, and access to resources. The individuals in the outer circle are given lower levels of influence. These relationships are usually defined rather quickly after a new person joins the team. The three phases in the LMX process are role-taking, role-making, and routinization. During the role-taking, the leader assesses the member's abilities and talents. The types of powers and influences that might get recognized during this evaluation could include a member's expert, referent, informational, and connection abilities. In the second phase, the leader and member partake in an informal negotiation whereby the role is created, giving the member a sense of their level of power in exchange for dedication to the organization or project. Trust building is an important part of this phase. If trust is not attained, the member may face consequences as not being recognized as a member of the group. The most successful negotiations take place when there are a number of similarities with the leader, such as gender, race, and culture. Finally, routinization happens when a member settles into the group. This is the ongoing social exchange between the leader and the member becomes established and clear. Success or the quality of the LMX relationship works best when there is trust and respect and coercive power is not implemented and as part of the exchange. LMX also works best when the challenge of the job is very high or very low and the expectations of the leader were exceeded. Team members should work hard by taking on more than their share and also be responsible and supportive of team activities. Leaders should pick their inner circle carefully and be reverent in their approach to the team and utilize their reward power for work well done.